We'd been outside the village, I should imagine, now for about an hour, hour and a half, or perhaps longer. And sometime in the evening, somebody's coming out of the village with the white flag. And then lots of our fellas have gone from the ditches and whatever they'd been hiding or sheltering or taking cover, got into the middle of the road to welcome these that were surrendering. When they were about 10, 15 yards away from our chaps, some of the people that was behind the forward march threw hand grenades amongst our chaps, and we lost quite a lot of fellows then, and lots of chaps were wounded. And this was the pattern, apparently, that they were using the women and children of the village as a cover, and then throwing these grenades over, and they ran away at the back after having caused a commotion. And the same thing happened after in Quinto.
I went into this vast barn. With me were about 10 of the soldiers who had just followed me in. I heard a scuffling and I said, "Quiet, please, there's somebody here." We scraped the air off the floor and there was a trap door. We lifted the trap door and shouted, "Wenger." And I started to walk down the steps when Copeman came and going to push me back out of the way and going to throw a bomb. He made the motion of putting an hand grenade down. I said, "Don't be so bloody silly." And suddenly a young woman handed up a child. It was stiff with terror. A young girl about 11 years of age. I lifted her up and turned her to another soldier and left her down. And then suddenly another little kid about 9, a boy 9 years of age. The terror, you know, your blood run cold.
There was a crowd of our boys all laying about dead. One was Ford, a coloured man from America. He was secretary of the American Communist Party. And I seen one body laying on the road, only his head I could see. And I said to one of the boys, I said, I know who that is. I said, "It's Saddam Al-Ghadi. He come out with me." He said, "Well, go and have a look." I said, "No, if I go and look at him," I said, "I'll go down with him."
Just before it was getting dark, and it doesn't take long to get dark in Spain, it's light and then dark, the people who were coming out of that village, women, children, all the rest of them, and when they got to where our line was supposed to be, but which unfortunately seemed to be about 100 yards behind us, because Jack and I were left on our own. I walked up to the road now thinking that they were going to give themselves up, and all hell broke loose. They started shooting and throwing grenades and Lord knows what. But there was a fellow lying on the ground, George Brown. He'd been wounded, I think he had in the leg. I couldn't be sure because I didn't have time for anything. I put my rifle down, I got on my knees to see if I could help him, and I looked up and there was a fellow with a rifle, not 12 yards away. Well, he fired that shot and he hit me in the chest, and I thought he'd thrown the village at me. It was such a terrific bang that it's hard to believe that a small bullet can hit so damned hard. It spun me right around. Then he had 2 more goes. He just grazed my thigh and he just grazed my ankle. I thank God he was a poor shot. But he didn't make any mistake with George Brown. He started firing into George and he finished George, and I had to lie there more or less half unconscious, playing possum like, till our boys come up.
The people that were killed or died in my hands, we had nowhere to put them. We just let them lie where they were. And when things eased off, we buried them. For example, at the bottom of Brunete, there was a place called Mosquito Hill. It was a hill. And below the hill was a valley or dried riverbed. Well, I had a first aid post right at the bottom of the riverbed. And people were dying. We'd nowhere to bury them, only in the bottom of the riverbed. We just buried them there, no tags. We didn't know who they were, half of them who they were. We took their wallets or whatever they had on them. We identified them that way. But they were buried without any identification whatsoever. So God knows what's happened to them. Half of them been washed away with the river since then. The river's in flood.
across really some fine lads in that offensive. And it did lead to a lot of upset on the part of the members of the battalion, and some left the battalion. Some actually found their way home. Some failed to find their way home and were picked up. This is a minority of the battalion, obviously not the bulk of the battalion.
You're talking about desertion.
About desertions, yes. As I say, some found their way back to Britain on boats that were coming into the Spanish ports. A number were picked up inside Spain, were brought into the prison in Albacete, Garda National, and I was having to go to the prison to interview them. And the campaign, I had a discussion with the American commissar, and we had a meeting with the brigade commander, and we are insisting that the desertions were not in the normal sort of category. They were the outcome of a lot of frustration. They were the outcome of a certain amount of conflict in battalion leadership and brigade leadership, clash of personalities mostly, not political.
Just how good were these leaders as soldiers, as distinct from political idealists? What was their background? At Brunete, how well equipped were the commanders to command? Will Painter again.
At that time, the battalion commander was a man named Fred Copeman, who had been in the British Navy, was involved in the Invergordon mutiny in 1931, and had undergone a certain military training. But it would be correct to say that from the standpoint of understanding strategy and tactics in any kind of depth, that wasn't possible in the circumstances of the Spanish War, although a number of the higher commanders, some from Russia, I know one from Germany, did have experience of military activity, you know. But generally speaking, at battalion level, I wouldn't say they were naive. I would say they were completely inexperienced and untrained in what was required of commanders in the field. What they learned by experience, the hard way.
We crossed the Ebro, the terrible bombardments going on. There was a fascist counteroffensive they broke through. Then it was every man for himself.